I was humiliated at my new job. They did everything they could to get me to leave. But that night, when the killer was inside the station, I was the only one who could get up. Tut. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, and write in the comments what city you're from. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not according to them, not according to the way their eyes slid past me when I entered the precinct for the first time, like I was a smudge on the floor someone forgot to clean up. The building was older than I thought it would be. Stale. The walls yellowed with time and bureaucracy, fluorescent lights humming like they were tired too. The air smelled like burnt coffee and sweat, and in the lobby, the flag in the corner drooped like it had lost hope. I adjusted my uniform. It was a size too big, boxy in the shoulders, and the fabric scratched my neck. They'd given it to me with a shrug, like even the cloth didn't want to be associated with me. The badge gleamed despite the dim light, but it felt too heavy for my chest, like it belonged to someone else. There were framed photographs on the walls, officers in crisp uniforms, medals, smiles, rows of faces, all white. I tried not to notice, but my body noticed for me. The way my spine tensed, the way my mouth dried, the way my fists curled inside my pockets. A man walked by me without saying a word. His eyes skimmed over me like I was furniture. Then another, and another. Finally, one of them, a tall officer with a face like carved wood, stopped. "You the new cadet?" he said. I nodded. He didn't shake my hand, didn't smile, just looked me up and down like I was a package delivered to the wrong address. Lockers in the back, women's rooms under maintenance, you'll change in the archive. That was it. No welcome, no tour, no handshake, no mention of my name. The archive smelled like mildew and forgotten paper. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, some labeled in faded Sharpie, some not at all. I found a corner behind an old filing cabinet and pulled on my uniform pants as quickly as I could. There was no mirror, no place to breathe. I remembered what my father said the night before I left for training. Be silent until you understand the room, then speak like you own it. I had swallowed his words like medicine, bitter but necessary. He had once worn this same uniform, though his had been stripped from him with ceremony and shame, when he refused to stay quiet about what he saw in the force. Corruption, misconduct. They called it insubordination. I called it courage. I emerged from the archive, straightening my belt. A cluster of officers glanced at me. One of them smirked. "Hope you're good at coffee runs," he said. That's how I started. I smiled politely. He looked surprised, like I wasn't supposed to smile. My name wasn't on the rotation board. They said there was a mix-up, told me to sit tight and wait. So I did, for 2 hours, alone on a cracked plastic chair near the back exit, sipping water from a paper cup and pretending not to hear them laugh. Later, someone handed me a clipboard. Traffic duty, corner of 38th and Langley, no radio, just observation. I walked there. It was 3 blocks away. My shoes weren't broken in yet, and they bit into my heels like teeth. When I arrived, I stood there for 2 hours, counting the cars that didn't stop at the sign, watching children drag backpacks down cracked sidewalks, watching a woman push a stroller past the liquor store with broken windows. Nobody talked to me. Nobody looked at me. Back at the precinct, I filed my observations into a system that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The password was taped to the monitor. "Make sure to clean up after," someone muttered as he walked past. Later that day, I was called into the squad room for the daily briefing. Chairs were already filled when I arrived. I stood in the back, notebook in hand. The captain, a square-jawed man with a buzz cut and a voice like gravel, never acknowledged me. He spoke of numbers, arrests, community presence, rising tensions in the South District. He made jokes. People laughed. I didn't. When the meeting ended, no one turned to me. I stayed behind, watching them disperse like they had somewhere better to be. I looked at the dry erase board. No mention of me. My name wasn't there. I found an empty desk near the supply closet. It wobbled when I leaned on it. The drawer was jammed shut. I placed my notebook on top and wrote the date in the corner. Beneath it, I wrote 3 words. They don't see. The next few days were the same. Dead-end assignments, errands. One morning, someone placed a coffee order on my desk. No note, just a list. I didn't respond. I let the paper sit there, untouched, until someone came and took it away. The women's restroom was still under repair. I heard rumors from dispatch that it was fine, but the key had mysteriously disappeared. I asked once. The officer at the front desk smiled without humor. Use the archive, builds character. My partner, if he could be called that, was an older officer named Doyle. He never spoke to me unless it was to bark orders. He refused to ride in the same car. Said it was nothing personal, but I could hear the emphasis in his tone. He always called me Rookie, never by name. On my 4th day, we were dispatched to a domestic call. A woman said her ex-husband had returned, drunk and shouting threats. When we arrived, Doyle stayed in the car, said he'd cover the perimeter. I knocked on the door alone. The woman answered with a bruise under her eye and a toddler on her hip. Her ex was gone by the time I arrived. She cried as I took her statement, apologizing over and over. I wanted to hug her, but I didn't. Instead, I gave her a card with a crisis number. I wrote my name on the back in ink that smudged with her tears. Back at the station, Doyle scribbled something in the report and left early. I sat at my desk and replayed the call over in my mind. Something about the woman's eyes haunted me, like she knew I couldn't really help her, like we both understood the system wasn't built for people like us. That night, I called my mother. She didn't ask how work was. She just said, eat something. Then she said, your father would be proud, even if he wouldn't admit it. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling until I forgot what day it was. The next morning, someone had taken my chair. I stood for an hour before finding a broken stool in the evidence room. My nameplate was missing from my locker. A crumpled paper cup filled with cigarette butts sat on the shelf inside. I cleaned it out without saying a word. Every night, I wrote in my notebook. Every comment, every slight, every detail. I didn't plan to report it, not yet. I just needed to remember. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. They expected me to quit. They expected me to snap. I could feel it in the way they watched me, waiting for a raised voice, a slammed door, a complaint to HR. But I didn't give them that. I nodded. I smiled. I worked. Because I wasn't supposed to be here. But I was. And I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I began to notice things. That's what happens when no one talks to you. You start watching. Your eyes work harder. Your ears pick up the small sounds, the weight behind footsteps, the frequency of silence, the pauses between words. You begin to live in the space between other people's conversations, listening not to what they say, but to what they avoid saying. By the 2nd week, I had learned the names of everyone in the precinct, even though only 2 of them had said mine out loud. Officer Myers always tapped his pen 3 times before speaking. Sergeant Harlan kept a flask inside his boot. Officer Green smiled at the captain like she owed him a favor. None of this was useful yet, but I kept track anyway. I wrote it all down in the back pages of my notebook in ink that soaked through to the next sheet. The assignments didn't improve. Most shifts were silent patrols in neighborhoods they considered low priority. Doyle rarely spoke to me unless he had to. I drove. He dozed. We never shared a meal, never exchanged personal details. I stopped expecting anything from him and began cataloging his behavior like everything else. What he watched, what he ignored. The neighborhoods they sent me to looked like forgotten corners of the city. Boarded-up windows, sidewalks with weeds growing through cracks, rusted playgrounds with no children. People looked at me with suspicion or exhaustion. Some said nothing. Some said too much. But in every call, every interaction, I sensed the same undercurrent. No one believed we were there to help. One afternoon, we responded to a call near South Langley. A teenager had been caught spray painting the side of an abandoned laundromat. Doyle stayed in the car. I approached alone. The kid was maybe 15. His eyes flicked past me like he expected someone bigger, someone louder. When I asked for his name, he hesitated. When I asked why he ran, he said, "Cops don't ask, they grab." I let him go. Wrote in the report that the building was already condemned. Doyle didn't argue. He barely glanced at the paperwork. That night, I looked over the incident log from the past 2 weeks. Something felt wrong. I couldn't name it yet, but a shape was forming in my mind. Too many calls clustered in the same quadrant of the city. Too many responses ending in unable to locate suspect. I overlaid the log entries on a blank map and circled each location. Patterns began to emerge, not clean, not perfect, but something. I started a second notebook, one just for the calls that didn't sit right with me. I titled it Shadows. It felt dramatic, but it fit. Each page had a time, a location, a summary, and my notes. I drew connections with red ink, arrows pointing across neighborhoods like nerves in a body no one had dissected yet. In almost every case, there was a detail that matched. A disconnected call that preceded the incident, a hang-up, a vague report, a warning, the kind of call dispatch labeled non-emergency. But they came minutes, sometimes seconds, before something went very wrong, and no one else seemed to notice. One evening, I stayed late. Everyone else had gone home or moved on to bars and backrooms where rookies like me weren't welcome. I wandered into the archives, not the part where I changed clothes, the deeper section, the one with dust and dead air. I opened old boxes at random. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I'd know it when I saw it. Eventually, I found a case from 6 years ago. An officer killed during a traffic stop. No suspect, no motive. File marked inconclusive, but there was a note in the corner. Anonymous caller warned of ambush. Call not logged. That wasn't standard. Nothing about it was standard. I compared it to a case from last month. Similar location, similar caller, same result. I stayed up that night, rereading reports. I didn't sleep. My eyes burned, but I couldn't look away. There were too many coincidences, too many shadows. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something vast and invisible, like a cliff in the dark. When I brought it up to Doyle, he shrugged. People make fake calls all the time. You don't have to chase every ghost. I didn't argue. I just stopped asking. Instead, I kept watching. In the precinct, there were changes too subtle for most people to notice. Officers stopped using certain side doors. The captain started locking his office, even when he stepped away for 5 minutes. Sergeant Harlan stopped drinking from his flask. Tension, it was in the air. In the way conversations died when I entered a room. In the way people stopped laughing when I passed by. I began sitting alone during breaks, not just because I was unwelcome, but because I needed the quiet to think. I replayed calls in my mind, traced connections. The pattern was real. I could feel it. And every time I listened to the radio, every time a distorted voice crackled through the static, I felt something tighten in my spine, like I was being watched by someone who knew I was listening. It happened during a night shift, rain tapping the windshield like fingernails. We were parked outside a shuttered grocery store. The lights in the building flickered, though there was no power. Doyle was asleep. I was watching the rain when a call came through. Unit 12, report to 5416 Newberry. Disturbance, caller hung up. It was 2 blocks away. I nudged Doyle. He grunted and waved me off. I went alone. The house was dark, curtains drawn, no lights on the street. I approached the porch slowly, hand near my belt, not on it. The door opened before I knocked. A woman stood there trembling. Her lip was bleeding. He left, she whispered. But he said he'd come back. I stepped inside, gently, took her statement, called for backup, not Doyle, but another unit nearby. They came quickly, efficient, too efficient. The officers who arrived barely looked at the woman. One of them, Officer Green, took me aside. "You didn't need to call it in. These kinds of calls go nowhere." I stared at him. She was bleeding, I said. He shrugged. Domestic calls are paperwork. No one wants that. They left. I stayed behind. I sat with the woman until her sister arrived. I didn't say much. I didn't know what to say. When I got back to the precinct, the captain called me into his office. "Green said you overreacted tonight," he said. I said nothing. "You don't have to respond to every call like it's a crisis. That's not what we're here for." I bit my tongue, left without replying. In my notebook that night, I wrote, "They know, they just don't care." I started working later shifts, volunteering for night patrols. I told them I liked the quiet, but the truth was, it made it easier to follow the threads. The city spoke differently at night, softer, clearer. I learned which corners hid what secrets, which lights never turned green, which buildings were never truly empty. That's how I began to sense him, the killer. I didn't know his name. I didn't even know for sure if he existed yet. But the pattern was too consistent. Former officers, all with disciplinary records, all with gaps in their files, all dead under strange circumstances, and always, always, that call. I began to suspect he was one of them. A former cop, someone who knew the codes, who knew the schedules, who knew how to move without being seen. I kept all my notes in a locked drawer under my desk. I made copies, backups, printed everything. I didn't trust the precinct's system. I didn't trust anyone. One night, I passed the captain's office and saw the lights on. I lingered, heard voices. 2 men. One said, "We need to bury it." The other said, "If she sees it, we're done." They fell silent when I stepped into the hallway. I kept walking. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, the window cracked open, letting in the hum of traffic and distant sirens. I thought about the woman with the bloody lip. I thought about the boy with the spray can. I thought about my father, the way he looked when he lost everything and still said I did what was right. I wondered what it would cost me to do the same. The next morning, someone had left a Post-it note on my desk. No name, just a sentence. "You're not the only one watching." I didn't show anyone. I didn't mention it. But in my gut, I knew he was real, and he was getting closer. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that already felt wrong before the sun rose. The air was heavier. The city's silence felt unnatural, as though something in it had been removed or replaced. I woke up 20 minutes before my alarm, heart racing, though I hadn't dreamed. Or maybe I had. Maybe I just couldn't remember anymore. Doyle barely looked at me when I climbed into the patrol car. That wasn't new, but something about his silence was different. Calculated, maybe, or anticipatory. He fiddled with the radio longer than usual, then said, "Newberry and 8th, suspicious noise complaint. Dispatch just logged it." I checked the system. There was no logged complaint. Nothing had come in within the last 30 minutes. "Who called it in?" I asked. He shrugged. "Didn't catch the name. Just go." I should have said something. I should have pushed, but I didn't. My gut twisted, but I ignored it. Habit, survival, trust was dangerous, but suspicion could get you ostracized faster than a badge could protect you. We drove in silence. As we neared the intersection, Doyle slowed the car. "I'll stay here," he muttered. "Keep the engine running. You check it out." I stared at him. "You're not coming?" He didn't answer, just leaned back, hand resting near the gear shift, eyes half closed, like this was routine. I stepped out. The street was too quiet. No dogs barking, no TVs glowing behind curtains. The houses looked abandoned, though I knew they weren't. I approached the address Doyle had given, 5471 Newberry, a one-story house with peeling paint, one busted window, and a sagging porch. The mailbox hung by a single screw. A security light flickered, then went out. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, hand on my belt. The door creaked open, not fully, just enough for me to hear it. I stepped back, waited. No movement inside. My radio was quiet. I called it in anyway, even though I knew no one was really listening. Unit 12 responding at 5471 Newberry, requesting backup for possible break-in. No reply. I repeated the call. Still nothing. I took a breath and stepped into the house. The air inside was damp. It smelled like mold and something older, something rotting. Floorboards groaned beneath my feet. I moved slowly, sweeping corners with my flashlight, hand ready. The living room was empty. Furniture overturned, dust thick in the corners, no signs of recent occupancy. I moved into the hallway. Then I heard it. A breath. Not mine. Shallow, wet, like lungs full of glass. I froze. There was a door at the end of the hall, closed. A faint orange glow leaked from underneath it, like the dying ember of a forgotten candle. I moved forward, each step deliberate, hand on the knob, turn. Nothing. The door was locked, but not from the inside. I backed away. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. I spun, flashlight raised. Nothing. I turned back to the door, now slightly ajar. I was being played. This wasn't a break-in, this was bait, and I was the trap. I bolted, out the front door, across the lawn, radio in hand. Unit 12 requesting immediate backup, possible ambush at 5471 Newberry. Officer in danger, repeat, officer in... Static, then silence, then a voice, calm, male, slow. You shouldn't be here. That's all it said. I kept running, didn't look back. I didn't care if it was the killer or Doyle, or a recording piped through some forgotten speaker system. I just knew I had to get out. I burst into the patrol car, breath ragged, and found it empty. Doyle was gone. The engine still running. The radio off. I floored it back to the station, tires screaming on the pavement. No one asked where Doyle was. No one questioned the empty passenger seat. I filed a report, 3 pages, detailed, precise. I handed it to the night supervisor. He scanned it, eyes skipping lines, then set it aside. "I'll see what I can do," he said, already turning to leave. He never did. The next day, Doyle was back at his desk. He didn't mention the call, didn't mention leaving me behind, just nodded once when we passed in the hallway. I realized then, if I died out there, no one would look for me. Not really. Maybe someone would write a statement. Maybe there'd be a short ceremony. Maybe they'd add my name to the wall of forgotten faces in the lobby. But that would be it. My father had warned me. He'd said, "The uniform doesn't protect you. It just changes the way they bury you." So I stopped trying to be protected. I started working for myself. I took every file I could access, printed every call log, every incident report, every strange complaint that didn't lead to an arrest or resolution. I mapped them all out. A pattern emerged, clearer now. The deaths weren't random. The victims were former officers. Every one of them had been involved in internal investigations. Some had complaints lodged against them. Others had simply disappeared after early retirement. And in every single case, there had been a call. Untraceable, unlogged. A warning or a declaration. They all said the same thing. He's coming. I went back to the archives, not just to hide, to hunt. I dug through boxes, tracing handwriting styles, looking for missing signatures, cross-referencing badge numbers that no longer appeared in active rosters. I found 3 reports with identical phrasing, written years apart, different precincts, same wording, same sentences, as if someone was copying from a script. Whoever this was, they'd been doing it for a long time. They knew the system, knew how to hide, knew how to make it look like coincidence. I tried to bring it to the captain, waited outside his office for 40 minutes. When I finally got in, he was on the phone. He held up a hand. "Leave it," he said. Didn't even look at the folder I handed him. The next day, the file was missing from my desk. No one knew where it went, or they pretended not to. So I made more copies. Stored them in a locker at a public storage facility across town. One under my bed, one in the glove compartment of my car, just in case. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because I knew what it looked like when people vanished. I had seen it, up close, in my own family. My father wasn't killed, but they buried him all the same. I wouldn't go that way. Not quietly, not unremembered. I began researching psychological profiles, studying the behavior of methodical killers, especially those with law enforcement backgrounds. Their patterns, their rituals, their logic. Most were loners, detail-obsessed, order-driven. Many believed they were fixing something broken, and I believed that's what this man thought he was doing, purging the rot from inside the badge. But it wasn't justice, it was vengeance. One night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself driving to the far edge of the city, to the oldest precinct building now abandoned and tagged with graffiti. I stood there for a long time, watching the windows. I imagined him inside, watching me back. I whispered into the darkness, "I know you're real." And the night held its breath. The next morning, I received an envelope in my locker. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, a photograph of me, taken the night before, standing outside that building, alone. I flipped it over, one sentence scrawled in pen, "You're not ready." I didn't tell anyone, didn't show anyone. I just stared at the photo until the shift ended. Then I got in my car and drove to every location tied to the previous murders. I took pictures, made notes, collected newspaper clippings, recorded interviews with locals. Everywhere I went, someone remembered a call, a warning, but no one remembered who made it. One man said it sounded like a preacher. Another said like someone who already knew how it ended. I compiled a timeline, cross-referenced every incident, narrowed it down. He was circling the main precinct. Each incident was closer than the last. He was coming here. I was sure of it. I prepared, bought a backup recorder, charged my body cam before every shift, carried extra batteries, memorized the emergency exits, watched everyone, watched their hands, their gait, their silences. Because I knew the next target. It wasn't me, not yet. It was the captain. He was at the center of everything, connected to every compromised file, every cover-up, every investigation that ended in a shrug. If the killer wanted to make a statement, this was it. And I wasn't going to stop it with permission. I'd stop it on my own, or die trying. I signed up for the night shift voluntarily. No one asked why, and I didn't offer. By now, the quiet contempt they used to throw at me had evolved into something stranger, unease maybe, as if they were starting to suspect I was no longer what I appeared to be. I wasn't just another diversity hire. I wasn't a rookie anymore. I was watching, and I knew things I shouldn't. I didn't sleep the day before. I prepped instead, charged my body cam, tested my audio recorder, checked and rechecked my gear. Flashlight, cuffs, spare keys, pepper spray. Not that I thought any of it would matter if things went bad, but preparedness had always been my armor. When they refused to train me properly, I trained myself. When they tried to keep me in the dark, I turned the lights on alone. I wore my uniform like a second skin now, no pride in it, just readiness. The sun set slow that evening, dipping behind the high-rises like it didn't want to witness what was coming. I parked my cruiser a block from the precinct and walked the perimeter. There were exits I'd memorized, shadows I knew better than my own reflection. The city was still, holding its breath. I felt it, that crawling chill at the base of my neck, the same one I'd felt that night on Newberry. He was close, and he wanted to be seen. At 1:04 a.m., I saw a movement. A man stepped out of an alley behind the station, moving with precision, not hesitation, not stealth, but calculation. Like he belonged here. Like he knew exactly what time the janitor left, exactly where the cameras faced, exactly how long the loading dock stayed unlocked after a delivery. He was tall, black jacket, cap low, no visible weapon. But his eyes, when he turned, his eyes weren't searching. They were aiming. I stayed in the shadows, followed, silent. No backup, no radio. I didn't dare alert anyone. Not because I didn't want help, because I didn't trust help. He circled the side of the building, past the dumpsters, and stopped near the rear entrance, used only by senior officers. He stood there, unmoving. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A key card. He swiped. Door unlocked. He went in. I followed. I didn't stop to think about the rules I was breaking. By now, they'd never protected me anyway. Protocol was a wall that others climbed over. I had been forced to learn how to tunnel beneath it. The hallway was dark. I kept my steps light. I knew the layout. This led straight to the rear stairwell, then up to the captain's office. He was heading there, just like I knew he would. Halfway up the stairs, I hit record on my camera. My hand hovered near my belt, not over my gun, but over the small clip I kept next to it. Non-lethal restraint cable. They'd laughed at me when I requested it during training. "No one uses those," Doyle said, "unless you're Batman." I was fine with that. Batman survived. At the top of the stairs, I paused, listened. His steps were slow, controlled. I counted, measured the distance, turned the corner. He was there, 10 feet away, standing outside the captain's office, head slightly bowed, like in prayer. He held something in his hand. I stepped forward. "Don't." He turned. His face was calm, no surprise, no rage, recognition. "You're the one who sees," he said. I didn't reply. He smiled, faintly. "I wondered when you'd follow." He didn't move toward me, didn't reach for a weapon, just looked at me like he was waiting. "Put it down," I said. He tilted his head. "It's not a gun." "What is it?" "A reckoning." I stepped closer. He didn't flinch. I saw now what he was holding, a file, paper, not a weapon. He opened it, slowly, and dropped it at my feet. Photos spilled out, victims. But not the ones in the reports. These were alive, smiling, a girl with bruises on her neck, a boy with a fractured jaw, a woman in a hospital gown, victims of the officers he'd killed. I knew some of their faces, had seen them in faded reports, never followed up. Cases closed with a shrug. The man's voice was quiet. They swore to protect. They lied. I didn't argue. He waited. I stepped forward. "Give me your hands." For a moment, he didn't move. Then he did. Slow, deliberate. He knelt. I cuffed him. No struggle. Just silence. The weight of 1,000 unsaid truths hanging between us. When I called it in, the response was confusion, disbelief. The captain himself didn't understand how I'd known. I didn't explain. I let them fumble. Later, the footage from my body cam leaked. I don't know how, but it did. Media latched onto it. "A rookie officer apprehends the vigilante killer." Headlines, interviews. They tried to paint me as a prodigy, a symbol of new policing. I declined every request because they didn't know. They didn't want to know. They wanted a story with edges filed down. They didn't want the truth, that I'd been ignored, dismissed, abandoned, and still showed up. That I'd solved the case not because of them, but in spite of them. The captain tried to claim credit until someone anonymously sent the full case file to the press. The real story, the cover-ups, the pattern, the reports that went missing. He was put on administrative leave, then retired early. No charges, just silence. As always, I was offered a transfer, homicide, promotion, new badge, new office, better hours. I declined. Not because I didn't want it, because I wasn't done here. They'd buried the rot deep in this place, and I was just learning how to dig. Now, when I walk into the precinct, people don't ignore me. They nod, smile, sometimes. They don't know what to say. That's fine. I don't need their words. I know who I am. I know what I did. And I know who I did it for. The woman with the bloody lip, the boy with the spray can, my father, and the girl who changed in the archive because the women's room was under repair. She's still here, Still watching, still waiting. I open my notebook, a new one. Clean pages. I write, "The system won't change unless someone enters it with clean hands and refuses to let them get dirty." I pause. Add one more line. Not a hero, just a witness with a badge. Then I close the book and go back to work. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more. Feel free to share it and check out other videos on the channel. Your support helps bring more voices and stories to light.